Hello! Just wanted to say that this is a fairly rough video that myself and Zach from the YouTube channel City Connections made together, exploring our thoughts before and after a public meeting that we attended in the Inner West regarding upcoming changes to zoning in New South Wales. Briefly, the plan from New South Wales Labor involves upzoning land 1.2 kilometres from 8 rail stations and 400 metres from another 31 rail stations, in a bid to try and increase housing in Sydney and fix the housing crisis. This video is a bit more rough and more casual than my standard content. It's kind of more like a podcast. I'll link you to my previous, more polished housing videos in the top right. Once you've finished watching this video, dive on down to my pinned comment, where I'll give you details on how to join the housing advocacy group Sydney YIMBY, and how you can help support the upcoming zoning changes by writing a submission to a parliamentary inquiry, trying desperately to stop the changes, which will keep Sydney expensive. Let's get into it. Hi Zach.
Hello.
So today we are going to a public meeting with the Greens member for Balmain. Her name is Kobi Shetty, and she's running a council meeting regarding the upcoming changes that the New South Wales State Government are introducing. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
So it's part of Sydney Metro West, which is the line between the CBD, particularly Hunter Street Terminus, and Westmead via Parramatta. Yeah. Part of that is they're building a new railway station at the Bays. So
Yes.
when that opens...
Which is next to Balmain.
Yes. So when that opens, I believe in 2029 it's meant to open?
No, 2032.
2032. Either way, it's not only a decade. But once that happens, there'll be a train, I believe, every 5 minutes during peak.
Oh, that's the 4 minutes. Every 4 minutes during peak. It can go up to every 2 minutes.
Part of the proposal is to upzone the surrounding precinct to 8, 6, and 4 stories, where most of the area is basically just R2 or single family detached homes.
So we kind of wanted to do this video to give my viewers kind of an idea of what to expect at these council meetings. So over the next few months, there's going to be lots of council meetings like this, where the councils are kind of deliberating and discussing the changes that are upcoming to the New South Wales planning system, allowing more density where people want to live, next to stations, next to town centres and that type of thing. And of course, these type of council meetings attract a very specific kind of person. We like to call them NIMBYs, not in my backyard. We like to call ourselves YIMBYs, so yes, in my backyard. I've actually only been to one. I've been to Mortdale, and so I'll talk.
Yeah.
So I'll talk a little bit about that. So I went to a Mortdale council meeting. So Mortdale's down south on the T4 Eastern Suburbs and Illawarra line.
Yep.
They were kind of discussing densifying around their station, and I think it was called Save Mortdale Village or something. They were all saying no more than 4. Like that was their slogan.
Which is a bit insulting considering the proposal was for, I think, like 2 6-story buildings right next to the train station.
It was something like that.
And most of it was still 4 stories anyway.
I think my impression from that council meeting was they were very rude, like extremely.
One guy went off at you, so
yeah,
they weren't happy.
Yeah, one guy went off at me. Talking a bit more about Mortdale, yeah, the older residents were pretty rude. I think there was a general implication that us younger folk, us younger YIMBYs, didn't have a right to the conversation, because there was one phrase that kept coming up, which is they're not ratepayers, which is true because we don't own property.
It's kind of insulting to intentionally block housing so young people and more people can't move in, and then complain these people don't have a right to complain because they don't pay rates. It's like council meetings are for everyone, and planning decisions made in Mortdale are going to affect you in
Absolutely.
I can't remember where you live.
Up in the hills, West Penrith Hills.
Up in the hills. It affects me out in Penrith. Everyone has a responsibility and a right to go to these events and comment, because it affects all of us.
Absolutely. Today's council meeting is not, so one thing I want to make clear, this isn't technically a council meeting. It's what we call a public meeting, which is basically just Kobi Shetty, who's the state member for Balmain. She's just going to be just talking with the community about their concerns. It doesn't actually have any bearing on anything, but it is a good insight into what you can expect at council meetings, because the type of folk who come to this would be the type of folk who go to those as well. And they'll be raising the points that at this meeting that they would normally raise at those council meetings. So it's good practice. We're going to go through the kind of points that we hear there with you guys, and the good rebuttals for them, because there are plenty of rebuttals. At Mortdale, they all said, why don't you just all move out to Picton, which was quite rude.
Or saying everyone should just move to Picton or Western Sydney is one of the stupidest points you can make. Western Sydney is already struggling to cope with the amount of people.
It is.
Suburbs. The suburbs in Sydney's east, you know, Woollahra, Ryde, Sydney, Inner West, etc. You know, Georges River. They're not carrying their weight when it comes to population growth.
Absolutely
you know,
not.
Inner West, where we are now, the population growth of this suburb over the next 20 years is only 14,000 people. Penrith alone is 54,000. You know, Camden, I think it's like 90,000. You got areas like Blacktown, it's like 160,000.
Exactly.
And
the Inner West is just not pulling its weight. There is literally a train line named after the Inner West, and they're just not pulling their weight at all. Immigration, that's the elephant in the room. Cutting immigration to solve the housing crisis, just very briefly, it's just not a good idea, because I think people think of immigration as purely a demand, but it's actually a demand and supply. So when you increase immigration, you're also not just helping to increase demand, you're increasing supply as well. Supply of workers, you know, there's more people to help build our houses. So if we just cut immigration, actually our housing growth is probably going to struggle a lot more. We have a skilled labour shortage. Skilled labour in the form of the people who would normally be building those houses.
a lot of construction workers are immigrants. So
Exactly.
if you cut off the supply of, you know, new construction workers, what do you think is going to happen to the housing market?
It's not going to recover.
You've just destroyed supply.
Yeah, you've just destroyed supply. I think there's an idea that it's purely immigration that's driving the housing crisis. And if it was, yeah, maybe like cutting it would help, but it's not. Like there are people like me who are aging and now need to find somewhere to live. There are lots of kids, you know, even interstate immigration into Sydney, which doesn't happen very much because it's so expensive, but that's something that, you know, would drive population growth. Schools and hospitals, that's a very common argument, that the
Yes.
schools and the hospitals are overloaded. So again, I'll just be very brief. The schools in the Inner West are not overloaded. On average, schools in the Inner West are just 5 to 10% of the schools are over. The Hills is like 30% over.
Yeah.
Blacktown was 15 to 30% over. So the West is where it's struggling, not the Inner West. The Inner West are fine when it comes to schools. I mean, they are, if anything, we need to do more to help increase the school population, because the number of school kids is shrinking. The most crowded hospitals in Sydney are all pretty much in the West. So Blacktown, Campbelltown, Liverpool, Bankstown, all are ranking below average in terms of resources back in 2021. None of those are in the East, none of those are in the Inner West, so I don't like the hospital argument because, you know, the problem's in the West. I'll talk a bit about Kobi Shetty. So she's I believe, a new state MP as of the last election. She's a Greens member for Balmain. Now here's the thing, the Greens, of course, like it's in their name, they're all about the environment, right?
Yeah.
They're about protecting the environment and also increasing housing. Like you check their website, they want affordable housing, but a lot of the individual MPs do everything that they can to like block that, you know? So Kobi Shetty, for example, back in 2021, she campaigned against overdevelopment in Balmain. They were going to overdevelop Balmain with a building. Now,
Overdevelop in big quotation marks.
Do you want to guess how many apartments? Oh, you probably already know, but...
Oh, if I remember correctly, it was 435, wasn't it?
6. It was 6. They were building 6 units in Balmain, and she and her community all called it overdevelopment.
If that's what overdevelopment is, then...
Take a trip to Penrith, or take a trip to Blacktown, take a trip to Parramatta or something.
Yeah, if
no,
the
that's
Greens actually care about the environment, what they'll do is they'll want to encourage development around things like train stations, because it means people don't have to drive to work. But because we're not doing that, we're demolishing floodlands and floodplains.
Exactly.
And building single family detached
And I think
homes.
she has cited that tree canopy is like a reason, like the Inner West is going to lose tree canopy because of these changes. But for every 1 tree you cut down in the Inner West to build a high-rise apartment, you're cutting down like 100 trees out west to build like a few houses, you know, because houses use land more inefficiently. That's just the simple truth.
And there's also the fair point of, you know, you look at a street like this, yeah, it's nice and tree covered. But if you built high rises all along here, you would still have trees. You don't, just because you're building a high rise doesn't mean you're going to go and have a tree genocide.
I like the example of Artarmon. There's a lot of trees there. It's a very dense suburb. And yet they've managed to keep all their trees. Don't claim you care about the environment if you're going to oppose high rise. Okay, it's just simple as that, Kobi Shetty, and all Greens members who are watching. It's hypocritical. It's simple as that.
And not to say, you know, there aren't concerns about high rises, but, you know, any concern about high rises is dwarfed by the concerns around low density urban sprawl.
Second half will be longer, so if you can make some time for that, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what we're doing right now. Thank you. Keep watching. Just got recognized. That's on camera. That's good.
If you want a single family home, I'm sorry, you can't, like, don't live near the city and expect it not to change. If you want a single family home, move out to the country. Honestly, it was shocking, like, coming through here and seeing, like, just the abandoned storefronts. It's like...
Exactly. I saw so many abandoned storefronts. I wonder why. I really wonder why.
Because there's no one... There's bloody no one here.
And I admit, like, along the inner west line, like, at Lewisham, you will see some density, but that's it. And yes, Leichhardt doesn't have a train station, but it has very frequent buses. I checked that bus stop right there, and there's a bus stop over there too. It's like a bus every, like, 3 minutes or something. So there is still very frequent public transport here. Leichhardt North Light Rail is like a 10-minute walk in that direction. So don't tell me the inner west doesn't have enough public transport.
Yeah, it has far more public transport than Western Sydney, like by a wide margin.
Yeah,
like my area only has buses. Some come only every half hour, some every 15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. I have to ask, if Balmain doesn't have the infrastructure, Balmain with a metro station, with frequent buses, with frequent ferries, like a 5-minute ride to the city on the metro and like 10 or maybe 15 minutes on a bus or a ferry, if that isn't good enough infrastructure, oh, mind you, unpopulated schools, like the underpopulated, like the schools have fallen in population. If Balmain isn't the right place to put density, then where is Kobi, Shetty? Where is the right place? You know?
Because I can tell you right now, Camden doesn't have it, Campbelltown doesn't have it, Picton doesn't have it, Penrith doesn't have it, Kingswood doesn't have it, yet that's where all the people are going.
We strongly encourage you all to go to council meetings because if you're watching this channel, let's be honest, you're probably a Yimby, and you probably support a lot of what I'm talking about, and you probably want to make a difference. It's
going out in your community, it's advocating for the causes you believe in, it's going to council meetings, to public meetings, and advocating for what you believe in. Because the NIMBYs there, they are going to every single one. Yimbys, we don't go to every single one.
Because we just don't have the time. I mean, like, just to come here, I had to, like, sacrifice a lot of uni study time. I have like 2 exams next week.
It was a 2-hour trip for me to get here.
Exactly. Many of you live in places like the Hills, in places like Ku-ring-gai, where, you know, you still live with your parents, but you are a resident of that area. Even if you don't own the house that your parents live in or wherever you live, you are a resident of that area. You have the right to advocate. And even if you don't live there, you can go to other council meetings. I mean, you're probably not going to have a stronger voice because they will raise the point that you don't live there. That doesn't mean that you don't have the right to be there. Like, you still have the right to be there. Just being there is a very strong symbol. I think we've covered everything. Is there anything you want to say, Zach, before we go into the meeting?
Not that I can think of.
Good luck. Wish us luck.
Hopefully we're not shot.
We'll see you guys on the other side.
Oh no.
So the council meeting has ended. It is currently 9 o'clock, and that was a real doozy. Wouldn't you agree?
I can't put into words what it was like. It felt like watching a Neil Breen film, kind of, where it's like I recognise what's being said, but I can't work out why they're being said in the context they're being said.
So I have to admit, it was a bit less showdowny than we expected.
I wanted blood and guts.
Yeah, so Zach wanted blood and guts. I did too. But the thing is that Kobi, she talked for pretty much the entire hour. We didn't really have much time for questions.
There was one guy who wanted interrupted to talk about trains though, which...
Oh, here's a bus now. See, the buses run like all night, you know?
Yeah. Like that's probably...
And that's like empty.
In the time we've been recording, this is like the 3rd or 4th bus going one direction.
I have to admit, it wasn't like everyone was old. There was some middle-aged, but mostly old, it seemed. What we're having is a policy that's about housing affordability, which affects young people like me and Zach. That is
mostly affects young people.
Mostly affects young people, not entirely, but mostly. But most of the people who are coming to meetings like this are old people. So it's a bit of a mismatch here, you know?
In terms of like numbers, we were almost certainly outnumbered, maybe
we were outnumbered. We were outnumbered. But we wore these shirts, you've probably already noticed, so that helped to make us more visible at least, and probably helped to make it seem like there were more of us, I reckon.
They also didn't have one of my size, that's why I'm not wearing one.
So community consultation is something that Kobi Shetty brought up a lot. She basically said that the community hasn't really been brought along with this, but I guess my issue with that is that when the government bring the community along, they say no. So we discussed like before the meeting that Kobi Shetty herself has protested against 6 units in Balmain, 3 of which would have been affordable. She protested against that in 2021. Yeah. So it's like when they do, so she wants consultation, but when they do consult, she just says no.
Yeah, it's not saying that consultation isn't important. It's a very important, it's a very important aspect of town planning, and even just outside of that, democracy, which I'm assuming a lot of us agree is a good thing. There needs to be some sort of level of give and take. If you go to a community, it's like, okay, this needs to be done, because we do need to build more housing in areas like Balmain and, Leichhardt and generally inner west, inner city areas. We need to build more housing in. But if every time you go to those areas and say, we want to build more housing, here's how we're going to do it, and they just go, no.
She talked a lot about tree canopy as well. She was like, Ku-ring-gai Council have done a lot of consultation on tree canopy, and they found that apartments will reduce tree canopy. I think my problem with that, and I've already touched on this, my problem with that is if it's not trees in the inner west, if it's not one tree in the inner west for an apartment, it's like 10 trees at west for urban sprawl. It's not as though the inner west exists in a vacuum where if it loses a tree, then climate change is going to overrun the world. If the inner west cuts down some trees, then a lot of trees get to be saved out west. Yeah, here we go. So the State of the Environment report from 2021 pointed out that sprawling into agricultural lands impacts food supply. It also helps to reduce biodiversity in areas around cities. Most importantly, emissions in sprawling cities are far higher, okay? Barcelona and Atlanta, compare those two. There was a document that did that back in 2017. They both have 5 million people. But in Atlanta, the emissions are 6.9 tons per capita compared to 1.16 tons in Barcelona. Barcelona is like 10 times smaller than Atlanta.
Yeah.
So, everyone's able to live closer to things, right? So they don't have to drive as far. Here we go. So here's our burgers.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. Our dinner has just arrived.
I believe that's his.
Thank you. We should
Cheers,
probably
mate.
stop recording and eat. So, okay. We'll be back. We need to eat too.
Yeah, I think that's the case. Like, it's just going to be a case of, we want consult.
Oh my God, there's a cockroach in my chips.
Oh, that's the end of your chips then.
So continuing on, so she suggested, and she did this over and over again, she kept suggesting, and this is something NIMBYs will always do, basically that housing is not being built in the appropriate areas. But like, it is. The TOD SEP is chosen 31 stations for 400 to 800 metre rezonings. So I have to just ask, and this is something NIMBYs always say, like they say they haven't chosen carefully, but how is that not choosing carefully?
Yeah.
Like
I said this to one person, if they were coming out and be like, we're going to propose we're proposing a 32-story building, but we're putting it in the middle of, I don't know.
Oran Park.
Yeah. We would be coming out and opposing that.
The Bays West is a station that will have a metro up to every 2 minutes in the peak hour. Each metro can transport 1,000 people, 40,000 people an hour. How is that not enough infrastructure? How is that not the perfect location?
If not here, then where? And again, if you're a Greens MP and you care about the environment, if you're not building here, it's going out to Penrith and we're bulldozing koala habitat to build single-family homes.
It just came out last week that since 2016, 35,000 people between the age of 30 and 40 came to Sydney, but 70,000 left, okay? And this is from places like Balmain where they can't afford to rent anymore. Okay, they're leaving Sydney in droves, yeah? And I don't understand what the solution to that, if not to increase supply, right?
Yeah.
She was very overly focused on public housing, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, which to be fair isn't necessarily a bad thing,
We agree that we need more public housing, absolutely.
Yeah. And to be fair, I think, I can't speak for you, but again, for myself, like, if the proposal was 100% public housing, no qualms for me. I would love that.
I would support that too, but I think right now we're very much reliant on the private market to build housing. Yeah. Okay, that's just how it is. So, and the private market aren't going to build public housing, they're not going to make a profit. We agree, like, the way the market's set up, like, I'm not going to go too much into that because I'm not an expert on that, but we agree. It's almost as though because we're not building 100% public housing, we shouldn't build any housing.
Yeah, it feels like letting perfect be the enemy of good enough.
Yeah.
There is a point where you just got to go, it's not great, but it's a good start.
That's the thing, and I wish Kobi would admit this. She should be agreeing and supporting these changes, but then advocating for more public housing. See it in her actions. She opposed 430 homes on Parramatta Road earlier this year, near a light rail station. She opposed just 6 units in Balmain, 3 of which would have been affordable. The evidence is all there. She was a supply denialist as well. She repeatedly said, building luxury apartments here won't do anything to solve the housing crisis. Now that was confusing because earlier on she said, we aren't denying that supply helps drive down prices. So it's almost like she wants to have her cake and eat it too. She agrees with us, but then the next sentence she disagrees with us. People have been surveyed. A lot of people don't agree that if you increase the number of units or houses, prices will go down. In fact, people tend to believe the opposite. I think there's a perception that new houses and new apartments are nicer, so that means they'll be more expensive. However, research has consistently shown that this is not the case. In Auckland, when they upzoned 3/4 of their land, 3-bedroom dwellings went down by 22 to 35% lower in rent than they otherwise would have. Even the RBA has said that zoning and heritage in general means we're paying 40% more than we should be for rent. Like, it's just ridiculous. And New South Wales Productivity Commission said that if we had increased the average height of apartments built in the last 5 years from 7 stories to 10 stories, our rents would have been saved. We would have saved up to $1,800.
I would have loved to have an extra $1,800 in my pocket.
She said that councils have spent decades carefully planning everything, their roads, their schools, their transport, their zones, and now it's being torn up.
But not really. Like, when they rezone an area, they're not coming in and be like, no more roads. We're burning Norton Street. We're going to convert it into apartments.
It's not just that. The Inner West Council have had heaps of time to rezone, and they just don't.
Yeah.
43% of the Inner West Council is locked up in heritage. That's insane. As I said already, the Inner West has their own train line, for crying out loud. If not here, where?
Literally, none of this would be an issue if the Inner West Council actually went out of its way to increase housing densities and, did it automatically. The reason we have to have governments intervene in this way is because councils like Willoughby, Ryde, Sydney,
Inner West,
Bayside, Randwick, etc., are locking up their suburbs to stop new housing.
Yes, the councils have carefully master planned, but they've carefully master planned for the people who already live there.
Yeah.
For the most part. I'm not going to, it's not a blanket thing, but for the most part, that's what they care about. The people who are already there. They care about appeasing the NIMBYs who appear at council meetings. They don't care about new people who are coming in. That's where the state government comes in, because their vote doesn't depend on locals. It depends on everyone in the state. And this is a very common argument with NIMBYs, that natural light will be obstructed if they build more apartments.
It is one of those concerns, but at the same time, it's like
you're letting thousands of more people live in your area and not have to leave Sydney. More people get to be closer to their families. And it's like we don't dare sacrifice a bit of natural light. So you guys can go live out in 50-degree west instead. It's selfish. It's selfish. Okay, it's selfish.
It's just insulting.
Everything she said was very confusing. But I think it is very much representative of the type of thing you're up against with NIMBYs, because it's not going to be the classic examples you see on, online, like, oh, we should just stop immigration, or, our schools are full, because those are very easy things to rebut.
To be fair, online it's, we should stop immigration, followed by slurs.
In a way, it was a bit disappointing, because it's harder to rebut when the arguments are all over the place. But it also is good practice, because that is kind of usually how people will structure their arguments. When you don't have very much good evidence to go off, which is the case with NIMBYs, then you kind of do have to be all over the place. There was one member of the audience, as we were walking around after the meeting, who kind of shouted at me. He was like, "Sharad, they're having you on, they're playing you," or something like that. And it was really weird. And he was going around and abusing a lot of us NIMBYs.
It's good to know that Sydney NIMBYs only using you.
Yeah, they're just using me.
They're not using me.
He shouted at me, and I think he was shouting at a lot of other people. I felt bad for them, but I think us Sydney NIMBY folk handled it pretty well. Me and someone else in Sydney NIMBY, we actually went up to Kobi Shetty and we actually talked to her. I mentioned that, the New South Wales Productivity Commission said rents would go down if they built higher. Yeah, so she said, "Do you actually believe that?" I was like, yes, because the New South Wales Productivity Commission said it, and I trust them. Yeah, she also said that if you, Sydney's one of the least dense cities in the world, we've all accepted that. Yeah. But she said if you actually just check 10 kilometres out from Sydney, we're actually more dense than London. First of all, okay, but we should really be checking all of Sydney. Second of all, why is that so bad? Is that really such a bad thing that we might be a bit denser than London? I mean, we're still very unaffordable. I'll just summarise the main points. Common arguments of NIMBYs, schools are overflowing. Do the research. I'll link the article. A lot of the areas where they're protesting, the schools aren't actually full. Yeah. Hospitals are full. The main hospitals that get complaints are out west. Okay. Public transport is inadequate. Just simply look at a map and see where the train lines go. Quite often they go...
Or just look at where we are now. There's a bus going past.
We've had 10 buses pass us, and it's past 9 o'clock. Supply denialism, there's so much supply. Grattan Institute, RBA, New South Wales Productivity Commission. Everyone says, Auckland is a good example. Everyone says increasing supply decreases prices. So if you're going to go to a council meeting, and I'll put all the arguments that I've said in this video, like in the description or whatever. If you're going to go to a council meeting, you know, what this video is trying to do is to arm you with the ammo and to tell you what to expect from the meeting, like the things that these councillors and these state members are going to be saying, because they're going to be saying stuff that's somewhat bewildering and confusing, and that could be hard to rebut, but there is very strong evidence that backs up what we're saying.
You have evidence on your side, effectively.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we're pretty much done.
Yeah.
We really should get home.
I got a train to get.
Yeah. So make sure you check out Zach on City Connections YouTube channel. Do you want to plug yourself or?
I think that's it. The Metro video, and that was good. I like that one still.
Yeah, the Metro video was very good. Watch his Metro video. Tangara replacement was good too.
Yeah.
But yeah, we will leave it there. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
Okay, cool.
No more filming. Go bedtime. You need to scull your beer, by the way.
What's that?
Oh, you need to scull your beer.